Hello out there, and welcome to Season 4 of Your Next Mission video podcast. We have a powerful show today about dealing with the loss and grief. Gold Star mother Holly Higgins-Staudacher will tell us how she came out of the darkness after her son Danny's death in Afghanistan and how she's trying to help others who've lost sons and daughters heal as well. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Your Next Mission video podcast, where we tell the stories of those who have served in the past and those who are serving today. From transition to financial wellness, VA benefits to mental health, we cover issues facing veterans, active military, and their families. Now here's your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army and co-founder of the American Freedom Foundation, Jack L. Tilley.
Hello out there, warriors past and present in your families. Thank you for your service to our great country. Now, before we get started, I personally want to thank our presenting sponsors, Navy Federal Credit Union, Purdue Global, and USAA for making Your Next Mission happen. They love our veterans and families, and I'm going to say it every week, we love them too. As I said earlier, we have a powerful show today with a topic that's tough to talk about, but it's too important not to. And I'm so pleased to introduce Holly Higgins-Staudacher, Gold Star mother, also a Gold Star ambassador for Hero's Journey and Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret, a play written by and produced by Lieutenant Colonel retired Scott Mann, who recently was on our show. Holly, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm honored and excited to be here today.
Holly, before we get started, could you tell the audience just a little bit about yourself?
I am the mom of 4 sons and 3 stepdaughters, and 3 of my 4 sons served. One was in the Air Force, Daniel, and my youngest son, Eric, served in the Army National Guard for 6 years. And my 3rd son was about to start training to be a ranger. That was his dream. He had a bad accident, and the Army told him they couldn't use him anymore, but after years of working hard, he is now a police officer, so he's serving in that capacity. And I was a nurse myself and a social worker before I came to know Scott and start working with the Hero's Journey as their Gold Star ambassador and liaison Families of the Fallen and facilitator for our storytelling workshop and storytelling coach.
Certainly sound like you stay pretty busy there, that's for sure. I don't think anyone that who hasn't experienced the loss of a son or a daughter themselves can really understand the level of grief. What did you do to manage it? And really, how do you live with it? I mean, that's got to be devastating for you.
It was the most painful experience of my life, and it set me back a few years. Emotionally and professionally. I took some time off. I discovered a couple of things that just by instinct, by collecting stories about Danny, when I consciously thought about how I was never going to get another memory of him. I started reaching out to family and friends, asking for stories about Danny, everything they could tell me. And I got a lot of things I'd never heard before. And that really set me on a path of healing. Storytelling is so powerful. And then serving, using that since I've been working with Scott and with the Hero's Journey, using storytelling in the service of others has also brought great healing to my spirit and soul. And I have a wonderful family and friends. That helps too, but it never goes away.
Yeah, I really can't imagine. What about the rest of your family though? How are they dealing with it?
It's hard. It's hard for me to actually know for sure how the kids are doing because they don't want to hurt me any worse. They don't want to bring any more pain on my heart, and so they tend to hide their pain from me. I do know that our stepdaughters have become very involved in CrossFit. They do a lot of events and always in honor of Danny and make a point of of his name on their equipment and their uniforms, and running marathons. In fact, my son, who is the police officer who had that accident, is running a full marathon in a couple of weeks in honor of Danny. They all do a lot in honor of their brother, but they are really dealing at night in the dark when they're alone. I don't know, and my heart is concerned for that. My husband supports me in this work, in this service, and that is him healing.
Yeah. Do you talk to your kids quite a bit about the loss of your son? And I'm sure that comes up in the discussion each time. Do you talk about what kind of things did they bring up? What did they talk about?
Well, they will tell me stories because storytelling. They know I'm always interested, and they still haven't told me everything. Those teenage years and college years, and they share things like that cause us to laugh. They try to avoid the tears, as boys usually do. The girls want to hear more stories and the funny stories too. Um, I bring up Danny probably more than they do, and I haven't. I'm looking forward to. By the way, I'm going to be meeting with another Gold Star family member who's a sibling, and find out more from her how her journey has been and what, as a mother, I do support my kids in processing this grief that will be never ending for them too. It'll be in this world a constant.
Well, I think the biggest problem is that they don't know what to say, and they don't want to upset you in any way, and they just want to make sure that probably people that even Danny served with in the military, and the men and women that he served with. I mean, I'll tell you a quick story, man. I was a body escort coming back from Vietnam. I went in the military with a good friend of mine. He got killed. He got his stomach blown out, and he bled to death. But I remember when I went home, I was a body escort, and I didn't know what to say to his parents, and really in fact, the only time I've seen his parents is at the first time they reviewed the body. You have to stand next to him because I was standing right next to the remains there, and there were so many tears that was coming down my face. Even now, when I talk about it, it's hard to get through it. But it's just hard. You just don't know what to say, and you don't want to say the wrong thing. It's really difficult. I'm sure I'm sure all the people that you deal with probably told you the same thing. I'm sure, maybe.
Yes, a lot of people are afraid to say anything to me, and I don't want to upset them either.
Yeah.
And it's a situation too where I have it's actually kind of a funny story, maybe, when we were coming home from California from his service. So I was in a fog still at that point, and we had the big box, with the big flag in it. And when the plane landed, I had taken my shoes off, and my feet were kind of swollen, and I had to try to get my shoes back on. So my husband, I told him, "Go ahead, I'll get out there as soon as I get these on." And I was bent over, and people were all going out and going out. And pretty soon I was alone in the plane, still trying to get my shoes on, and kind of crying, kind of down, feeling I didn't want to feel place going home. And I heard one of the flight attendants come in, and she ran up to another one. They were in the aisle, and she said, oh my gosh, you know that man with that big triangle box? And the other, yeah. And she goes, I thought it was a cheesehead because they were going to Wisconsin, and I teased him about it, and I found out it was a flag. And she started sobbing.
Yeah.
And I popped up, and I ran to her, and she goes, oh no, you're the one, you're the mother. And I said, it's okay. And I threw my arms around her. So I was comforting her, and that comes up, and that's okay. I feel that's okay for them to realize that this is the hardest thing a mother will ever go through, but I will go through it. I am going through it. And it's life. death is part of life. And so I feel called to making sure that people know it's okay.
Yeah. How long did it take, some of Danny's friends to contact you? Did they contact you immediately?
No. One did within 6 months. He was one of Danny's closest partners. The EOD teams are in teams of three. So his one of the three that wasn't injured was injured too, but not so much that he could not do anything. He ran to Danny and tried to do everything Danny told him to do, because Danny had been a paramedic, so he knew what to tell them to do to help him. They did tell me he was calm and lucid the whole time. But Mark is the name of this man. He told me the whole story. And after that, that was 6 months after Danny had been killed, and we were together in person. I have never heard from him again. His wife did contact me many years later and said she didn't know if he'd ever be able to talk to me again. He's having that hard of a time. So that was the first one. And then it was 2 years before I heard from another one, and 5, and then 7. And each time, not so much with the first one, because I was a little shocked still myself. It was still early days. But now I've told them, each call I've gotten this time, I said, oh, if this upsets you, I don't want to do that. I will hang up. I'll go away. I don't want to cause you any more pain. And I say, no, don't go anywhere. There is nothing, and I have shared this with other veterans who have lost brothers in arms. There is truly nothing you could say that could hurt me anymore than Danny's death. And if you want to talk about it, don't be afraid to tell me what you saw. Mark did, the first his friend. There's nothing I haven't imagined. You couldn't tell me anything worse than what I've imagined. In fact, it might be less. And even if it's the same, I find, this is going to sound odd, but I find it to be a strange comfort. Oh, what happened to my child?
Well, I think it's probably therapy for that person that's telling you the story too, to talk about and get out. Just like you was talking about storytelling. I mean, once I get it out, if I hold it in, it's going to cause a lot of problems. But if I talk about it and get it out there and say what I got to say, then it just makes me feel better. I mean, maybe not feel better, certainly not feel better about what happened, but feel better inside about knowing I did the right kind of stuff, to try to help Danny in his life or whatever. But it just always feels better if you just, get it out there and tell exactly what happened. I remember when I talked about my friend being killed, I never, ever, in fact, I never did talk to his parents after that day. After the funeral, I talked to him. But I went on with my military time. And so I was always gone, always deployed and stuff. And it was just, I look back at that now and I sort of second guess myself. And I wish I'd have reached out to him a little bit more. I wasn't with him when he lost his life, but I think those things are certainly important to talk about as much as you can, because it's therapy on both sides.
With Last Out, that's a huge thing that happens, is the play brings out people's own stories. And with us, the next show coming to Milwaukee, where a lot of Danny's friends are, most of them that I'm still in touch with are coming, but 2, the closest to him in high school and college, and one was his best man because he didn't want to pick one brother over the other, and also served as a Marine during the same time that Danny served. They don't want to come to the play because they're afraid they can't handle the pain and the feelings and the tears. And I've tried to encourage them not to be afraid, because like you said, it actually feels better. It doesn't take away the pain. There's something right about the tears when it's something that serious and real in your life.
I think sometimes when you cry, it's therapy. There's certain, nowadays, of course, I'm a little bit older, getting older every day, but it's I don't know, there's something in your brain that says, it's the right thing to do. And sometimes I think crying is maybe the best solution for a lot of stuff, but it's tough. It's tough to, Again, I couldn't imagine what you went through, but I think I said on a prep call, I've seen so much death in my life that I think in some cases my heart turned black. But when it's a loved one, when somebody close to you or somebody that you're associated with or somebody you're working with directly, it's different. Losing a life is bad enough, but losing a son or a daughter is, again, I couldn't even imagine. Yeah. Holly, we're going to take a quick break, so hold that thought. We'll be right back. We're talking with Gold Star mother, Holly Higgins-Staudacher, and you're watching Your Next Mission video podcast with me, your host, Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major Army. And don't forget, if you're enjoying this discussion, please like us. Click on that subscribe button below. Also, click on the bell next to the subscribe button to receive notifications about all of our upcoming podcast releases. Holly, you said that Danny's destiny was always to die in the battlefield. Why did you say that?
I came to that realization 7 years after he was killed. It wasn't something that I immediately thought. But the story of how I came to that begins way before we ever talked about military in this family. The summer that Danny turned 16, he went to Europe for that summer with a drama group, and they were on a mission, youth mission. Danny was a very popular and fun-loving athlete in high school, but he also was drawn to drama, to the arts, and drama was a way he expressed love, to express his love for God and share with others. And when he came home that summer, after being gone all summer, going to 16 different countries, brought me a gift. And it was, as I opened the box, it was a cup he bought in Scotland at a crockery shop. And he immediately wanted me to know that it was a second. And I said, you shouldn't have told me that. I never would have known. And he said, no, which was true. But he said, no, you need to know that, because I want you to know the minute I saw that cup, I thought of you, and I had to get it for you. I was drawn to it. And then when I was paying for it, they pointed out that it was imperfect, and wondered if I wanted. They went back to see if there was any more in the back, because that was the only one on the shelf. And it wasn't. And he said he said, no, I know, I'm getting this for my mom. I don't care if it's a second. It's so important. And I thought, well, that's sweet. So I was glad he told me that. And it was kind of sweet. And it was one of my favorites. And I, used it all the time. Well, 7 years later, he was killed in Afghanistan. And that cup became one of the most treasured items I had from Danny. And then I wouldn't let anyone else, not only not drink out of it, I wouldn't let them wash it or dry it or put it away, because I was afraid they'd break it. And lo and behold, 7 years later, so after 14 years of having that cup, I dropped it. Goodness, it was me. I had no one to forgive but myself. And it broke like perfectly in half. And so I was like, well, okay, this is cool. I'll glue it back together when I have time and make it a planter. So I put it, cupped it together, and I set it on my nightstand till I had time, so it would be close to me. That was October of 2017. And about a month later, on Veterans Day, in fact, I was reading the biography of Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae. And if you're not familiar with him, he was a lieutenant colonel and an army surgeon in the Canadian Army, World War I. He was also a poet. And he is the poet who wrote the poem In Flanders Fields. And that poem was written, he wrote that right after burying his closest brother, who was killed in Flanders Fields, which is in Belgium. He took note, he actually officiated the service for this dear friend. And afterwards, he looked out on the fields and where they had buried their fallen, because in that war, they buried them where they fell instead of sending them home like we do now. And he took note of all the wildflowers that were growing, and that most of them were these red poppies that were growing all over the field and in between all the crosses. And that's why he wrote that poem. And it was published in 1915, and it took about 5 years to go viral in those days. But by the 1920s, it had gone viral, and it worldwide, poppies were recognized as representing somebody dying in the battlefield. People started wearing poppies as corsages in the 1920s to represent that they lost a loved one on the battlefield. And sometimes our country goes in and out of that being recognized. And back when I was a child, I remember the little paper red poppies that, by the way, are still being made in Scotland. And we still see them today on Veterans and Memorials Day, but not as often, I don't think, as when we were young. But anyway, I had just come to the part in the book, in his biography, that said he was from a place called Guelph, Ontario, when I received a phone call. The phone call was, as I mentioned earlier, there was one of the soldiers that took 7 years to call me, and that was that soldier. And he was a Canadian soldier, which was coincidental. And he was one that had developed a good friendship with Danny. And Danny had told his brothers about this Canadian. My sons were all born up in northern Minnesota, right on the border, just below the Canadian border. So he had felt this affinity with the Canadians. They were attached to them on the mission. And he had planned, he and this soldier had made plans to meet in northern Minnesota with my family, with my boys especially, after the war, to do all their fishing and sled dogs and ice fishing and all the stuff they do. So that was him calling me, and we talked. He was scared, as I mentioned earlier, about calling me, and we chatted, and I invited him to join us, because we still go up to northern Minnesota all together, with all the kids and all the grandkids now. And I invited him to come and meet everyone, like Danny had hoped he could do. He was very enthusiastic. And before we hung up, I said, by the way, where in Canada do you live? And he said, well, I'm from and still live in a place called Guelph, Ontario. Now I'm like, what are the odds? I had never heard of Guelph, Ontario before I started reading that book. And it's a huge country. And I was just blown away. And I said, are you familiar with John? And I didn't even get the cray out. When he said, oh, yeah, we have a statue of him in the town square, and in Flanders Field, I know the whole story. And I said, oh, that's really cool. And so we hung up, and after that, some reason, I thought of my cup and there were red flowers on that cup. I knew that. I knew it was a blue background with red flowers. And I ran nightstand, and I picked up the cup, and I looked at those flowers. There were poppies. They're red poppies. And at that very moment, now Danny had been gone at that point for 7 years, and I'd had that mug for 14 years. I knew at that moment the reason he was so driven by that cup was because he was going to die on a battlefield. He didn't know it, not consciously. But I knew there was a message there, and it came through Danny to me, that he was always destined from the time he was conceived and born. That was his destiny. I do believe we all have one. We all have a time we're going to die. And the Bible talks about it, in Ecclesiastes, a time to die. And all over there are references to our time being determined.
When you realized that that was his destiny, was that a comfort for you?
Yes, it sounds strange, but it didn't ease the heart. That will never go away. But deeper than my heart and my soul, I felt an assurance that Annie met and accomplished his destiny. It gave me a peace I can't explain. All I can describe it as is that it is well in my soul, with my soul, even though it still hurts my heart.
Have you told that story to your kids, and what's their reaction from that?
They all know the story, and they seem to love it. They I've also told it to veterans that um, talk about their survivor's guilt and the pain of it, um, and help them maybe turn that perspective, change the lens of how they look at the death of that buddy, their brother in arms, instead of feeling guilty, like there's something they did, that there was nothing they could do any different. They couldn't save them. They couldn't cause it. It was their in arms choice to make the sacrifice, to take the oath, knowing there was a very strong possibility he might die in combat, and look at it as a privilege to have missed somebody you cared about and you were with and that you maybe loved meet and accomplish their destiny. It'll always hurt, but don't take the responsibility of it on your heart. Try to find that peace, that understanding that was their destiny, not yours. And my kids do appreciate the story. They've shared it, friends.
Well, one last thing here. I think the pain will always be there. There's no question about that. But you're a very special person, especially to share your stories and enlighten a lot of people. And this is, I think, we talked about it a minute ago. This is therapy for a lot of people, to include myself. So I appreciate what you do and what you continue to do. Holly, we got a lot more to talk about. So stay right there. Don't go anywhere. Don't you go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're watching your Next Mission video podcast.
You're watching Your Next Mission video podcast, proudly presented by Navy Federal Credit Union, the most trusted credit union owned by members of the military community, serving all branches of the armed forces and their families. Their members are the mission. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Purdue Global. You're ready for a comeback, and with Purdue Global, you can do more than take classes. You can take charge of your story, of your career, of your life. Earn a degree you can be proud of and get an education employers respect. Start your comeback at PurdueGlobal.edu. USAA.
A promise is a trust not to be broken, whether spoken with an oath
Solemnly swear.
or sealed with a pinky. And after 100 years, we're still taking care of the military community and their families. That's our mission, always.
Now back to your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, Jack L. Tilley.
Welcome back. We're blessed to be here today with Gold Star mother, Holly Higgins-Staudacher, Gold Star Ambassador for Hero's Journey and the play Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret. And I want all our viewers to reach out to directly. Tell us about your transition. Tell us what topics you'd like us to cover on the show. I always tell everybody, or I tell you anyway, this is not my show, this is our show. So tell us what you want us to cover. You can call or text me at 844-424-1134, and I'll actually reach back out to her. Send me an email at smatilley@yournextmission.org. Holly, as we head into our final segment with you, let's talk about your helping veterans and how you became a Gold Star Ambassador for the Hero's Journey. How did that come about?
That was through my meeting Scott Mann, and I met him the first tour he did of Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret, back in 2019, when it was just a one-act, 90-minute play, but it was powerful. And I had been invited to the play, and I didn't know about it at the time because they didn't have a Gold Star ambassador on staff that would be there. And so I just walked in with some high school friends because I didn't have a clue. We could have been walking into South Pacific for all we knew. We knew it was military, but we didn't know it was a very serious, heavy duty, but super healing play. And I met Scott. They whisked me up on the stage beforehand and introduced me to the playwright Scott Mann, and he was in his BDUs. He was ready he stars in it, and he introduced himself and said, I play the part of Danny, who dies in Afghanistan. To say, I was a little, it took my breath away.
Yeah.
He's since talked about that, realizing as he said it, because he knew my son's name was Daniel, because they were dedicating the play that night. So he was aware. It just didn't, like, kind of like me with that cup. It took me years to put it all together. And at that moment, he put that together and thought in his head, oh my goodness, how is this woman going to do this? And to be honest, it was a divine intervention and meeting for me. My husband recently even said that he's amazed at how much our Danny has in common with Danny Patton, the character in Last Out. It's, even though they're different, they're Air Force versus Army, and Green Beret versus EOD. It's all that stuff, superficial stuff, but character qualities are pretty similar, and that's been really interesting for us over the years. But Scott and I, there was an immediate connection, and after it was over, I was so moved. I was so validated by seeing, because that play shows family too. It shows the character going back and forth from what goes on in Afghanistan, what goes on at home in the living room, and it just it shocked me to see that. I related to that, but then experience the combat too, which I never experienced. So that was precious to me to know what my son experienced. And so the play was really moving. I hadn't been home for more than a few hours, and I wrote to Scott right away and told him if there was anything I could ever do to support this, let me know. I'm there. And from that moment on, he wrote right back to me, and we started kind of connecting, and he had me travel a few times with him when he was speaking and participate on some panel discussions. And within, I don't know when the title came about, but maybe it actually came about when he connected with Gary Sinise. After Gary Sinise saw the film that was made during the pandemic when the tour got shut down, and Gary saw that and said, that's got to go back. It's got to go back on the road. It's so powerful. There's nothing like live theater. And that's when Scott said, to me, I want you to be the Gold Star ambassadors. And what I do is in between our tour stops, I reach out to the families of the cities where we're going to be performing, and offer them the opportunity to come to the play, to have their fallen hero honored, and for us to dedicate the play to them and to honor them as family. And I take care of them over the weekend. I'm there with them. I know, but I don't know what they're going to feel like, but I know what's coming, and I'm prepared with water and tissues and hugs and support. And I bring them up now. Instead of somebody just whisking me up, they know ahead of time, and I greet them and I bring them up on the stage before the show to our pre-show circle. I introduce them to the cast and the crew and tell a brief story about their fallen hero, and they place something special on our wall of honor that then travels with the play to every city. And of course, over the years too, Scott trained me in the storytelling and how to use storytelling in the service of others, and how to now facilitate the workshops with him and the team. So we do that in between our tour stops.
Hey, do you stay in touch? I mean, all the people that you meet, do you stay in touch with them?
As much as they would like. I always reach out within a week and let them know that I'm here. I have resources. Many of them stay in touch. All of them do to some level, but some become very close friends of mine. And in fact, one Gold Star mom, Phoenix, care about the play. I didn't reach her until the day of the opening, and she wasn't able to come. We have been in touch, and she was gonna. That was back in June, I believe, and then she was going to come to our July, and she couldn't. And she's been wanting to. She has not seen the play. She has not been to a workshop. but she and I become very close. I've gotten her into some other opportunities and given her resources, and she recently shared with me that our meeting was divine to her and has changed her life. And she does plan to come to our Tampa show. So yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity to connect with other families of the fallen.
What do you tell other mothers who have lost a child? What do you talk to them about, or talk to them about it? Or I'm not sure what I would say. So I mean, what would you say to her? What do you talk to them about?
I start out with asking them if they're comfortable telling me about their hero and what their journey has been. I listen to a lot, and depending on what they tell me, one of the most important things I always want other families to know is to not be afraid of the grief and to not be afraid of those tears. Like we talked earlier, that tears are healing, kind of a bath for the soul, I think. And they will, even though it still hurts, somehow it feels right when you cry, when you grieve. And I believe that grief is a gift to help us mourn.
Yeah. First of all, Holly, thank you so much for being on the show today. You're an incredible person that's really doing so much, not just for your own family, and because I know that must keep you really pretty busy too, but for others. Any final thoughts? Anything you want to share with the audience? Maybe we didn't talk about.
I think just want to leave you with things. Why I do what I do has to do with the third stanza of that poem that I told you about, In Flanders Fields. And the third stanza says, "Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields." And to me, that stanza telling me it's my turn to take up the torch that Danny's failing hands have thrown to me. And I take up his quarrel now with the foe. The foe for me right now isn't the Taliban or disarming IEDs as he did. The foe for me is to be there for the families whose loved ones didn't come home like he didn't. That's not the foe, but the foe is fighting the fear. That's it. Fighting the fear of grief, and be there with veterans who have come home but have left their heart on the battlefield, and to help them understand that they're not responsible and they shouldn't carry that on their shoulders or in their heart, that feeling of responsibility. And the other thing I want to leave is a quote that I found recently, and I've done my research, and I don't like to say quotes and not give credit. I cannot find the person who said this. If you're familiar with it and you know, that would be awesome. My husband and I have done a lot of reading, and all we could find on Googling it is that it is taken from several passages in the Bible. It's a very succinct quote that has resonated in my heart. And it's, "There are times when God will take your deepest pain to launch you on the path of your greatest calling."
Oh my goodness, Holly, that was beautiful. I appreciate. Again, I appreciate all that you do and all you continue to do, and I just appreciate you coming on the show today. You're a wonderful person. God bless you.
Sergeant Major, I appreciate the opportunity to meet you and talk to you. It's been a pleasure.
I'm glad you didn't call me Master Sergeant at the end anyway.
I did. I said Sergeant Major.
There you go. Thanks a lot, Holly. I appreciate it. I'm Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major Army. You've been watching Your Next Mission video podcast. Please visit our website at yournextmission.org and leave me a review. I always say I hope it's a a good review. But if it's a bad one, I guess I can take that too. You can also visit our nonprofit and corporate partners where you can see all the jobs and services that are available to assist you in your transition from the military. We want to assist you any way we can. I want to say that again. We want to assist you any way we can. You can also follow me on my personal social media pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Rumble. And if you enjoyed this discussion with Holly, this is an important discussion for all of us to talk. Please like us. Click on that subscribe button below. And don't forget, click on the bell next to the subscribe button to receive notifications about our upcoming video podcast. Don't forget, we want to hear from you. Please leave me a message or send me a text at 844-424-1134. Send me an email at smatilley@yournextmission.org. Thanks again to Holly Higgins-Staudacher for sharing your story with us. And I'd like to leave you today with some final thoughts that, war is tough for all of us. And all of us, and I said it a few minutes ago, we've all seen death. If you've been in war and you've been in combat, a lot of us have seen things that we certainly just want to forget about and we never want to see again. And as you get older, sometimes it really bothers you a lot more. And I know it bothers me a lot more. But to lose the life of a loved one, of a son or a daughter, is something I'm glad I never had to experience. I couldn't even imagine how painful that could be for a family, for a mother, a father, and brother and sister. I always say we're all part of a family and we need to, take care of each other. Talk to each other anytime that you get a chance. And if you're in pain or you have problems, there's always people there that can, that can reach out to you and help you with anything that you need help with. Again, thanks for watching today. And thanks to New Mind Studios and, of course, our presenting sponsors, Navy Federal Credit Union, Purdue Global USA. We appreciate all you do for our military. And as always, see you on the high ground. Hooah!
You've been listening to Your Next Mission, brought to you by the American Freedom Foundation. Learn more by visiting yournextmission.org.